Hi, everybody. I just wanted to record our Chapter 1 PowerPoint. And this is kind of just the information that you should have already read. And I'm going to walk us through in 15 minutes or less. So let's hope I can stay to 15 minutes. I'm going to minimize myself here so you guys can see the background. Move everybody down here into the corner. And feel free to take notes if you want, but know that the PowerPoint and the video will be available for you online so that you can have access to it. I'll try to do my best to keep my ugly face here out of your way. All right, so we're taking a look at part 1 of our chapter, it's Foundations of Instructional Design. The book is an Orlick book. And so what part 1 is doing for us is it's providing us with an overview of foundations of effective instruction. And so we keep in mind that teaching as a helping profession and exploring social factors in teaching are two of the larger objectives as they relate to our text. And if you see me turning my head, I have the text here in front of me, so that way you're all able, I'm going to kind of page through it as well just to make sure that I don't miss anything. So let's get through some of our slides. Chapter 1, Frames of Reference for Teaching. So, and once again, it might be best if I move me, maybe even up here. Okay, so Chapter 1 is going to be really providing us with some cultural and outside contexts that are important to teaching, thinking about the teacher as a reflective decision maker, and the teacher as someone who's kind of conscientiously thinking through the processes and then evaluating them and then making informed decisions that we all do on a daily basis. It's really important to think about making that process explicit. So as you think about instructional design and the processes that you're going to employ in a classroom, you really want to be conscientious about what you're doing. So next slide. All right, so your frames of reference. Over here. That'll be better. Frames of reference is teaching. It's a snapshot of schooling and the profession of schooling. And then the challenges of reflective teaching and decision making here in this section 1 of chapter 1. So the book talks a little bit about $700 billion projected in expenditures for the year 2014. Obviously, that number does nothing but increase as it relates to the cost of providing effective and appropriate education for children across the country. This matches at that time at least 7.6% of the gross domestic product in the nation, and serves approximately 1 out of every 4 people in the United States. So the actual business of educating children is very expensive, and it's very challenging to do at a large level as it relates to 50 states in the union. So we always talk a little bit about facilitating the American dream, and that is trying to think through education. So not all individuals in our society profit equally from public education. There are many students who attend schools either in rural or maybe even urban settings, and they don't have, for instance, access to advanced placement classes or access to the variety of different extracurricular activities that some students might have, even access to good teachers, because in some of those rural communities it's very difficult to get a teacher to come and stay. And that's true in North Carolina as it is in every other state across the nation. So we as educators have an ethical and a moral obligation to enhance the potential for all students and to assure every student has equal access to those opportunities. And it's something I think that all of us have to really, really take to heart, because this is an incredibly important profession that we've decided to pursue. So we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to push our students in the right direction and to get them to be a part of what's termed as the American dream, because education is really the access point. So instruction as a systemic process. So the book talks a little bit about this. It talks about models of instruction. Instructional models are broad, overarching descriptors that is composed of several different concepts. And when we think about instructional models, if we think about a classroom and you think about what we're going to do in that classroom, as a high school science teacher myself, I would think to myself, all right, so if I'm going to provide a PowerPoint presentation and follow that up with a hands-on learning activity, and then I want to evaluate what the students know, I'm taking into consideration these learning psychology models. whether I'm employing a behavioral model or a cognitive model, a constructivist model, and or a developmental model, or if I'm doing two of these even in some cases in the same class. The book talks about organizational models. That is, are you going to do a large group instruction? Are you going to break those large groups out into small groups, like, for instance, cooperative learning? Are you creating learning communities in your classroom? And at what point in time are you going to individualize the instruction for kids? So, and then the book talks a little bit about classroom management models. These are, for instance, self-discipline models, as well as teacher-imposed discipline models or system-imposed discipline models. And so we've got to be really, really careful about the choices we make in terms of our management and the models we employ with children. We are going to talk a lot more about classroom management as it relates in Chapter 11, as well as throughout the whole course. So instruction as a systemic process, there's also strategies, methods, and techniques that the book highlights as one subset of a chapter. And so, embedded within any model is a set of all these accompanying experiences. And one of the things the book encourages teachers to do is with reflection comes experience. So as you employ a model in a classroom, whether it's maybe you're in a field experience, or maybe you're in your internship, maybe you're in your first year, maybe you're in your 25th year, but your experience with these models then leads you to have an informed decision about the learning models that you choose or the learning models that you hope works with your style of instruction. The book also talks a lot about the influences on instruction, and I could probably talk about this for about 3 hours, but I'll just allude to the fact that, for instance, there are federal levels that influence instruction. In 2000, No Child Left Behind Act, or maybe it was 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act came in, and so there was some major shifts in terms of how we educate children in the country. There's business groups that impact influences of instruction. For instance, Best NC and I got a link here, so you're free to link to Best NC. This is a business-oriented group that has a vested interest in making sure education is successful at the state level. And they're doing a lot of really good things to try to have a voice. And then there's advocacy groups, and advocacy groups can be, a broad group of different folks. There's advocacy groups for students with special needs. There's advocacy groups for autism. And then there's advocacy groups even for content areas. So for me, as a high school science teacher, K through 12 science is advocated by the National Science Teachers Association, NSTA, and I put a link there for that organization as an example of what an advocacy group could look like. So how to be an effective educator. So this is kind of interesting. The book talks a little bit about, umbrella, kind of big umbrella ideas. So be a systematic teacher, that is, employ a model, and then work within that model to help you become that best teacher for your kids. So knowing and applying models and being able to transition from one model to the next, depending on what is and isn't working with your kids. And always, always, always become aware of non-school influences, because these really are important. It's the context, it's the social fabric. Teaching your content is one thing, or teaching the content to kids is one thing, but really having an understanding of the situations where your students are coming from is a completely different one. It's really, really easy for all of us to teach kids that we know. I was very successful in a community where I taught, because the community where I taught, I graduated from the school right next door, the school system right next door to this one. So the two systems were very similar in terms of the type of students that I was and that I was teaching. So I felt really comfortable there. But you as a teacher may come from, or you as an individual may come from a very rural part of the state. You may come from an urban setting. And if you come from a rural part of the state and you go and teach in an urban setting, you really have to have an understanding for what those children are going through. So in any event, just be conscientious of that and make sure that you're informing others, that is, working and partnering and collaborating across a variety of different levels. So these key contexts of schooling that I alluded to a little while ago include social, emotional, educational, and collegial. Now, social, I talked to you about social capital. That is understanding the acculturation process that is schooling, understand the norms that are specific to not just your school system, your statewide system, your county, your region, And knowing that within a population of students, there's a pluralistic view. That is, there's students coming from maybe very wealthy backgrounds or socioeconomic status to very low socioeconomic status. Kids that come from very stable families, kids that come from families that aren't so stable. So there's a variety of different things we need to make sure that we recognize in our teaching that helps us connect and build out relationships with those kids. So emotional, that is caring. There's a whole line of research. The book talks a little bit about it. Nell Nodding's work in terms of caring. You can read more about that. It's really cool and very interesting information. There's emotional intelligence. That is, are you able to sense or feel the needs of your kids? And if so, then if you're able to do that, then you can respond accordingly and effectively and immediately in terms of what they're struggling with, that is emotionally. So if you've got a second grader who's been in 3 schools before, chances are when they come to your setting, they're going to have some frustration if they've been bouncing around. So you got to make sure that you recognize that and reach out to that child and make sure that they're supported. Educational, that is understanding your educational philosophy. What it is that you think about the idea of educating children, and not just thinking about it in terms of the 4 disciplines or 1 discipline or 2 disciplines, depending on what your grade level is, that you're going to be providing instruction for, but also how do you think about schooling in general? Are you a teacher-centered type of instructor? Are you a student-centered type of instructor? Are you behavioral? Are you constructivist? These are all really important things to think about in terms of schooling. Collegial, working with colleagues and not in isolation. I left teaching in 1999 because I really burned out. And of course, I really wanted to teach teachers how to do what I did. But a lot of that burnout was due to working in isolation and not having peers that I could depend on. So creating the learning communities like we're going to do in this class, and understanding that schools and cultures are different. So teachers' levels of functioning, making sure that you are recognizing whether or not you are intentionally disinviting. That is, are you purposefully, trying to do things in your class that's going to then motivate kids? And by doing so, are you going to disinvite them? That is, maybe create some small level of frustration so that they work above and beyond what they think they're capable of? Are you unintentionally disinviting? Are you making facial gestures like rolling your eyes where you're just turning kids off and therefore reducing their motivation? Are you unintentionally inviting? Are you actually setting up inviting situations, but doing it in a way in which kids don't know? And then, of course, intentional inviting, which is more or less, in some ways, just, giving kids praise. So you want to be aware of those things. Incentives of the teaching culture. Are you ensuring for student success, and how are you doing that? What incentives are you putting into your curriculum? Job recognition. Are you recognizing the fact that they're working hard? Efficacy, levels of functioning. So you want to make sure that you are taking lots of incentives, building these in to success and job recognition and efficacy and levels of functioning, so that way your students can work forward and partake in those motivational aspects. And then we move to professionalism and diversity. Again, we talked quickly about recognizing different cultures in your classroom, respect all who show up in your class, be cognizant of similarities and differences within your groups, and then you want to offer an enriched curriculum. And I apologize for moving so fast, but like I said, I want to keep these to 15 minutes. Characteristics of reflective teaching and decision making. Again, caring about your student, understanding those social contexts, questioning assumptions, knowing your content, identifying problems or issues in schools, collect relevant data about your kids, and construct a plan of operation. We're going to do a lot of this in assignment 1. Practice your problem-solving strategies, thinking prospectively and retrospectively. That's back to that whole idea of reflection. Realize that reflective is cyclical. Evaluate the results and processes used, make informed decisions, and use many instructional strategies. All right, last couple slides. I just want to make sure that you know that the reading in Chapter 1 is critical to effectively answering the required question. So see the section specifically on motivation. And the reading in Chapter 1 is very helpful in crafting a response to parts of those choice questions as well. And relative to actual assignment 1, information in Chapter 1 is useful, definitely, in completing assignment 1, specifically answering the classroom management component and the summary. I hope all's well, and reach out to me and ask me if you have any questions or concerns.